When the series finale of MASH aired in 1983, fans eagerly tuned in to watch the show's emotional send-off. While it may have been a fitting ending to the series, it wasn't actually the last episode that was filmed. Instead, the last episode filmed was the previous episode, which featured the characters of MASH coming together to bury a time capsule. The filming of this episode proved the last time the cast and crew were ever together, and hundreds of journalists were gathered to commemorate the momentous occasion. Join Factsverse as we take a look at rare footage from the last MASH episode ever filmed. Although the series finale may have provided a fitting ending to the series, the episode wasn't actually the last episode of MASH that was filmed. Instead, the final episode was the penultimate one. It was called As Time Goes By. It revolved around the show's characters getting the idea to bury a time capsule commemorating their time in the war. Given that the cast and crew of MASH had been filming the show for 11 seasons, the filming of As Time Goes By proved an incredibly emotional occasion. The episode aired on February 21, 1983, though it had been filmed a month previously. The filming had occurred on January 14th. According to the cast and crew, the filming was incredibly emotional. The time capsule they buried on screen featured real-life props from the series, meaning that the on-screen time capsule doubled as an actual time capsule for the cast and crew. Sadly, the time capsule ended up being dug up shortly after filming due to construction that was happening around it. Actor Mike Farrell shared after filming that it was hard for him to film the scene of them burying the time capsule, knowing it would be the last time the cast would ever be standing together on set. The burial of the time capsule was the final scene filmed, and the event was so emotional for the cast and crew, the director actually had to try to keep them from crying to get the scene done. Just as occurs in the plot of As Time Goes By, the cast and crew gathered things from their time together to put in the time capsule. Some of the things included props and costumes. Though it was dug up shortly after, it was reburied and is said to currently still reside somewhere on the 20th Century Fox lot. In addition to the cast and crew of MASH, the event was also attended by hundreds of journalists. There were estimated to be around 300 journalists present for the final scene of MASH that was ever filmed. According to Alan Alda, the presence of the journalists distracted from the cast and crew's enjoyment of the experience to a degree. It was meant to be a very personal moment for those who'd worked on the show, and the intrusion of the journalist ruined some of the intimacy. But it still proved a very meaningful experience for those involved, as well as audiences at home. While the plot of the time capsule was the main storyline in the penultimate episode of MASH, there were also a few other plot lines going through it. The character of Margaret spearheaded the campaign to create the time capsule, while other stories involved Father Mulcahy taking care of some refugees and Hawkeye trying to track down a missing helicopter pilot. The pilot never ends up being found, which leads Hawkeye to bury a piece of the pilot's helicopter alongside the time capsule at the end of the episode. According to Hawkeye, he does this to not only commemorate the pilot, but also to pay respects to all that was lost in the war. As Time Goes By ended up being the only episode of MASH to include a dedication. It was dedicated to a woman named Connie Isay. Connie was a registered nurse that had served as a technical advisor on the series for several years, starting in 1977 and ending with her death from cancer in 1982. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse for more. And stick around for more about MASH's filming. While As Time Goes By wasn't the final episode of MASH that aired, it was the episode that was filmed last. The series finale gave folks at home a chance to say goodbye to the series, but the filming of As Time Goes By was the cast and crew's time to say goodbye. The episode starts with the character of Winchester reading a newspaper that features an article about the burial of a time capsule. Although Winchester doesn't think a time capsule is a good idea, Margaret hears him talking about it and decides she wants to make one for the 4077th. Of course, 4077 is the number assigned to the character's Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, which is of course what MASH stands for. When Margaret shares the idea with Hawkeye, he initially doesn't seem like he's all that into it, but he comes around to the idea soon after hearing it. He and Margaret end up butting heads over what they think should be buried in the time capsule. Hawkeye wants to help Margaret decide what ends up going into it, while Margaret feels she should be able to decide what goes into it by herself. In addition to that plot, there's also the aforementioned plot of the refugees, as well as the matter of the missing helicopter pilot. However, most fans will have much more fond memories of the main plot of the episode, which is the one about the time capsule. Margaret ends up collecting a good deal of meaningful things to put in there. As she goes about collecting them, Hawkeye also collects some things of his own. Some of the things he collects include a bottle of cognac that he took from Winchester and a piece of toast he took from Igor. The strange nature of the items Hawkeye has chosen to include initially annoys Margaret, as she feels Hawkeye has purposefully chosen the items to mock her efforts to commemorate the 4077th. But she soon realizes Hawkeye is being sincere in his efforts and simply has different tastes about what should end up in the time capsule. Over the course of the episode, Margaret and Hawkeye end up becoming closer than ever as they decide to bury the metaphorical hatchet of their longtime feud alongside the 4077th's chosen belongings. Other items that end up being buried include some spark plugs offered up by Rizzo, combat boots offered up by Kelly, a selection of Zane Grey novels offered up by Colonel Potter, a fishing lure from BJ, and a teddy bear that had been left behind by the character of Radar, who was no longer on the series by the time of the show's 11th season. Father Mulcahy also offers up a pair of boxing gloves to place in the time capsule because his hope for the future is that there will be no need for weapons any stronger than boxing gloves. Finally, Hawkeye offers the aforementioned piece of the missing pilot's helicopter. While Margaret is initially angry at Hawkeye's insistence that the overly large piece of scrap be buried alongside her time capsule, she eventually relents once she understands the sentiment. The piece ends up being buried alongside the time capsule, and the scene marked the very last scene of MASH ever filmed. As soon as the director wrapped the scene, the surrounding hundreds of journalists enclosed on the set to get pictures of the tearful cast and crew's candid reactions. The series finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, was actually the first episode of MASH's 11th season to be shot, but the series finale proved a fitting ending to the series that pleased fans. It was actually a made-for-TV film that aired February 28th, just a week after the airing of As Time Goes By. The feature-length series finale follows the crew saying their goodbyes in preparation for their disbandment. Given that the cast and crew had plenty more episodes to film after, the filming of the episode wasn't nearly as emotional as the filming of As Time Goes By. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that the series finale of MASH wasn't the last episode filmed? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.